So let's look at some tips and tricks for creating value stream maps. Unfortunately, there's not a great program that's readily available for creating value stream maps, at least to the general public. You can have proprietary software that can allow you to quickly make value stream maps. But in terms of what's readily available, unfortunately, there's not really some good programming for that. So we have to create a value stream map by hand. We can use our Microsoft Visio to create a process flow diagram, or you can create a process flow diagram in Word like the one you see here on the right. But once we have our process flow diagram, sometimes we want to turn it into a value stream map. So let's look at the example of making macaroni and cheese. We see quite a detailed process flow diagram here on the right for making macaroni and cheese. And we see that we start with a circle and we end with a circle to indicate start and finish. Activities are in boxes, decisions are in diamonds. And you can see in this case, what results from decisions is, do we have the ingredients? Yes, we continue along the process flow diagram. If we don't have the ingredients, then we stop. You can also have it in terms of loops, like is the water boiling? Yes, we continue along the process flow diagram. If no, we go back a couple steps in the process. So we can see then how to make macaroni and cheese from start to finish. Now, how would we turn this into a value stream map? Well, value stream maps have a number of key features. The first one we want to look at is where we're going to get our supplies. That's this here on the far left. And who is going to get the product when we're done. So the customers, or if we're providing to another company, then this would be the company that receives our product. And then we have production control. That's us in the center that's managing this operation. So let's look at building our macaroni and cheese. So we're just going to do a bit of hand sketching. So when you look at a process flow diagram, the symbols that you have here on the two ends show where your materials come from and who gets the finished product. So let's say we're going to do Annie's mac and cheese. Okay, I get my supplies, let's say from Co-op, and the final finished product is going to be enjoyed by the kids. So here I am, my production company, me in the center here. And what we're looking at is how do we communicate between these different organizations? So how do you communicate with your supplier? If it is communicated electronically, so if we use e-commerce where we submit our orders online, so maybe you order from your grocery store, many of them now have where you can place your order online. If that's the case, then we have a jagged arrow here. So you can see there's pointed because the information comes from me to where I'm getting my product. And that little bend there indicates that it's electronic transfer of information. Now, if the kids tell me what they want verbally, then it is a straight line. Okay, so here we have the information flow. That's the piece at the top. And then what we want to do is we want to attach that to our process flow diagram. Now, the process flow is very complicated, so we are going to simplify it down in order to its key pieces when we do a value stream map, because the focus here is no longer on the steps in the process and the decisions. That's what you focused on with the process flow diagram. Now we're focusing on the flow of information and materials in a value stream map. So process flow was focused on steps and decisions. Value stream map, information, and material flow. So let's go back to creating our value stream map here. So we're going to have some key steps in the process. So if we just simplify it down, we have what? We boil water. Okay, we're going to add our noodles. And we're going to cook the noodles. And then at the end, we're going to add our cheese. Okay. So we've basically just distilled the process down to its key elements. Boil the water, add the noodles, cook the noodles, add the cheese. Okay. Now it's more detailed than that because we have to measure out how much cheese and how much water and all these pieces, but just the kind of the key elements. So once we've added the cheese, that final product is going to go to the kids. So we illustrate that here with this big thick arrow that shows that the finish of our process flow goes to the customer. And we need to have a similar big arrow that goes from our supplier to start our process. So we have a big thick arrow there. Okay. Now, when you look at your value stream map, we have information being conveyed from production control or whoever's in charge to whoever's doing the process. So let's say you're telling your kids how to make your mac and cheese. So then you're going to convey to them how to boil the water, how much noodles to add, how long to cook the noodles, and so on. So how are you conveying that information? If that information is being conveyed electronically, so perhaps you have an automated system at your manufacturing plant where the operations is sending a message through a computer system to say, here's what color, here's what the specs are, as we manufacture, let's say a car, then that would be conveyed electronically, and any electronic convey of information is going to have this kind of line with the little zigzag in it. But in this case, I'm making mac and cheese, and if I'm telling someone else how to do it, then it's probably just verbal. So these lines here then are just going to be straight lines. Okay. And you would indicate just where information is being conveyed. So if you don't have to provide information to one of your key steps, you wouldn't have an arrow. But in this case, I would probably be telling the kids how much to add of cheese and noodles and how long to cook. So likely I'm communicating information along all these processes. Now, the other thing we monitor when we look at a value stream map is how much inventory is moving between all these different parts. So you'll see these diamonds here, and the diamonds are your inventory. And so we're looking at how much of our inventory do we have. On the example that you saw in the previous lecture that dealt with lemonade, we had 1,500 lemons, which gets reduced down. You're then looking at it in terms of maybe you have liters or gallons of juice. Maybe you're bottling it. How many finished bottles do you have? So the inventory in that case, you can see the numbers go down as we're taking our raw materials, consolidating it into number of finished products. In this case, I could measure my inventory in terms of boxes of mac and cheese. If I have a family that needs 2 boxes worth, then we would put that we are going to get from Co-op our 2 boxes of mac and cheese, and we may choose to just continue to have those 2 boxes all the way through. Or we could change and look at measurement in terms of cups of noodles and into, cups of the finished product. So here we're tracking the inventory. And as the inventory moves, we mark that with an arrow. And because this is movement of inventory and not information, we're going to distinguish it here by putting some colors into our arrow. Now notice that this arrow is big and thick like the other ones we saw before, but the other ones we had when it came from Co-op to our process flow and from our process flow to our kids didn't have the color in it. So that's because we want to distinguish between raw material and finished product and then the parts of the process here. So the ones that are as we're doing work in process, so we have taken our raw materials and we're turning it into something, you can see that here with the color scheme on the arrows that are in the process flow versus the ones that are finished product or raw materials. Now, in the example with the lemonade, we see other things in that example. So, for example, you can see underneath the processes, there's a C/T or cycle time. That we use when we look at assigning jobs and how long is spent at different stations, when we look at the process, and we will look at that in more detail in a different level. Right now, though, we want to focus, we looked at the information flow, we look at the material flow, and the other key piece we want to put in our value stream map is the timeline. How long does it take? So how long does it take to get the material from co-op? How long does it take to boil the water? Right? How long does it take to add the noodles? How long to cook the noodles? How long to add the cheese? Okay, so we can break down the different steps of the process in terms of total time. This will help us understand lead time. So if we have the customers, this case the kids, say, hey, I want mac and cheese for lunch, how long does it take between placing that order and getting it? So this lead time would include going to get the inventory. So let's say it takes an hour to go to the grocery store. Boiling the water takes 10 minutes. How long does it take to add the noodles? Let's say 1 minute. How long does it take to cook the noodles? Well, according to this container, it says it takes 8 to 10 minutes. How long does it take to add the cheese? Well, we have to add it, melt it, so on. So maybe that's 5 more minutes. So we can look at the overall span it takes to do this whole process. And that helps us know that if the customer orders it, how long of lead time do we need? How long do we need between when they place the order and when it can arrive? So these are the key pieces to the value stream map. The information flow, remember it can be electronic or it can be verbal. The material flow from the supplier through the process flow diagram to whoever gets the finished product, and how much time it takes. There are other details that you might see at a value stream map, but that's beyond the scope of this class. We will look at some of those details separately as we look more at the process of production.